That's tomorrow, and that is it for us today. And we will leave you with a... I can't do it. We'll do it live.
Okay. No.
We'll do it live. Fuck it. Do it live. I'll write it, and we'll do it live. And thing sucks.
In 5, 4, 3.
That's tomorrow, and that is it for us today. I'm Bill O'Reilly. Thanks again for watching. We'll leave you with Sting and a cut off his new album. Take it away.
I love Bill O'Reilly. That's a classic. Welcome. This is going to be the first stream that I am doing on YouTube. Typically, I stream on Twitch, but I figured with the amount of people that are into politics, YouTube's probably a better place to go, especially with the younger demographics kind of going towards Twitch, because primarily people use it for video games now. Obviously, there's some talk show stuff there, but I just find YouTube's going to be a better place just because that's where most of my content's going to be posted anyway. So I wanted to get into a couple things tonight. I'm probably only going to go about an hour, if that, just because it's late and I'm just kind of running a test right now. There's a few things. I mean, I'm part of the Connecticut Common Sense podcast, which I recorded earlier today. Typically, I only do Tuesdays. This week, I did both Tuesday and Thursday, and actually, it's been like that for the last couple of weeks. But I'm only going to be able to talk about stuff one time a week doing that. So I figured since stuff is happening constantly in our state, in the political climate that we're in, especially with the elections coming up in November, it's probably best that I start coming and doing some live stuff just because I can record on a Tuesday and then everything will happen between that Tuesday and the following Tuesday, and I have no way of kind of discussing it or analyzing it. So with that being said, my name is Jonathan Anderson. I am an MBA student at the University of Iowa. I am a former business owner. I started a company, ran it for 10 years, got into a few lawsuits with some partners, won them, beat a $1 billion company for a lawsuit as well, unrelated to what my business was actually involved in. And then I sold it to a private equity firm because they are pretty much buying up everybody. So I decided to go back to school, and my focus is on strategy, artificial intelligence and technology management, and financial decision making. With that specialty, it's a STEM concentration. It's actually 3 concentrations, but they're mostly STEM, and STEM is science, technology, mathematics, essentially. So it just means I'm very heavy into the mathematics portion, especially with like a financial decision making certificate. What I've tried to do is use that to the Republicans' advantage, and I'm sensing that there's a large disconnect between the GOP chair, Ben Proto, and the rest of the state, especially the party. They don't seem to think that's the case, and I think it's most likely because he's getting so much love from younger Republicans. And by younger Republicans, I mean the Gen Z Republicans who really don't know any better. As for the millennials and the Gen X and the boomers, we know better. Most of the boomers might like him because he's a rhino, but from everybody I've talked to, they don't seem to agree with his strategy because he doesn't really have a strategy. And people like me who are willing to volunteer time to come up with statistical analysis of the races, we should be getting compensated through the GOP for our work. Instead, we're just doing it for free as a grassroots movement. So I've been spending a lot of time, at least this week, looking at historical data and kind of doing a comparison of what I think is going to happen using a forecasting, which is pretty common in not only statistics, but also financial decision making and accounting. So I'm taking a little bit of that business approach and applying it to the GOP and trying to help as many people run their elections on a much smarter basis versus just throwing money at the wind and hoping something sticks. We need to have a narrow plan and attack that plan and execute it in order to win in November. And I believe that there are several seats that we can, in fact, win as Republicans. But we're running into some issues. And I discussed this in a video earlier this week that a lot of people saw, which was how I was unregistered as a Republican. I wasn't registered as a Democrat, but they just simply took away my registration as a Republican and put me as an unaffiliated person. I checked that through the voter lookup, and I showed everybody that earlier this week. But I went on the next day and I tried to register through the Secretary of State to be a Republican. Um, Unfortunately, you can't do it through the GOP's website, and actually, the GOP's website is kind of trash, and it annoys me to no degree that there's just that lack of communication between the parties and the Secretary of State's office when it comes to voter registration, because I shouldn't have to go to the state in order to register within a specific party. I understand it if I have to go through the state to register to vote, but when it comes to the party, I should be able to just go to the GOP and do it that way. Now you can, don't get me wrong, but you can't do it online. You have to do it through your local registrar's office, specifically the local party registrar's office. So I'd have to go down. I'm coming out of Studio B here in Tallinn, Connecticut. I'd have to go down to the Tallinn Registrar for Republicans and fill out a paper form, or I would have to print off something from the state's website, fill it out, and then pay to mail it in to the state to have them update my status. Unfortunately, with primaries coming up in a couple of months, you can't even change your status from a Democrat to a Republican and then vote in the primary because there's 90-day hold. If you're unaffiliated, however, there is no hold. So fortunately, I should be able to vote in the primaries. However, I'm putting a lot of faith that my registration is going to go through before then. So I will be monitoring that. But an issue that I came across when I initially tried to do that through their website was they could not find me when I clicked I needed to register for a party. Because you can register to vote online. So it's basically the same process, except there's a little button that you press, party registration, and then it'll just ask you a question based off of that. And you have to put in your driver's license, your first name, your last name, etc. And it couldn't find me. And I'm thinking, did my license expire? Like, how can they not find me? Do these systems not talk to each other? Like, how are you going to ask for a DMV license if you're not actually connected to the DMV database when it comes to identifying people? So I know that they had some maintenance the other night, and I'm hoping that that was the initial issue, but I was able to get on today and actually go through the steps and register. I got the notification. I made sure that I had the paper trail, so I had them email me to say that they got it. And then I went back to the voter lookup page and it wasn't updated. So that tells me that it's not instantaneous, which I think is a little ridiculous, especially because taxpayer money funds this stuff. We need stronger IT. And the only way to get stronger IT is to get people that actually want to hire people that want to be in their jobs and not just collect a paycheck. I'm a firm believer that you are a public servant for no more than 20 years, and then you go back to the farm or you go work in the private sector. But we don't need these career bureaucrats or these career union guys working for the government, because that's what's slowing down the process across the board. So, with that being said, I'm hoping that everything is on the up and up now. I will keep everybody posted. If you are running into any problems, feel free to reach out to me. And honestly, you should be talking about this and making sure all of your friends are registered, because the issue with not being registered is you are going to get hit with a ton of Democratic candidates messaging because they're paying for the voter rolls of the unaffiliated. And as somebody that has apparently been unaffiliated, I hadn't received anything from Republicans, but I've been receiving stuff from the Democrats. And that's concerning because we already know that the Democrats are better at fundraising. And that's a failure of Ben Proto. But they also are outspending Republicans typically 2 to 3x. For every dollar we spend, they're spending $2 to $3, right? So as conservatives, we typically don't spend a lot of money, and you want to make your money work and go the farthest it possibly can, which is why people like me are volunteering their time to look at the stats and do this to help people out. So rather than people have to worry about not getting the proper communications, I think it goes to a greater issue, which is the Democrats are sending stuff out, the Republicans aren't. and I'm in a conservative area, so maybe that's why they're not sending me stuff as an unaffiliated person. But in reality, they should be sending it to the people that are Republicans in, or that could be Republicans in the Republican run areas of the state, because it means that we could get rid of Joe Courtney, who is the congressional um, elect representative out of this area. And typically, this was a conservative run district for a very long time, just like a couple of the other districts across the state were before District 6 got eliminated and it became 5. Once you drop down to 5, then every single district got an influx of party members from not only the Democrats, but also from the other non-majority parties in the state of Connecticut, like a Connecticut party, for instance, which we actually had a governor from that party before Roland took office. So prior to Jody Rell retiring, we were a Republican-led state from 1994 on. Last person that we had that was a Democrat before Malloy was in the 80s. So we had a good run, right? We not only did we have a Republican governor, but we actually had a few congressmen that were Republicans, and that gave us the support that we needed to get stuff done in Washington. We don't have that now. It seems like our state has imploded on itself, and we've got people like Ned Lamont just talking about electric rates and not actually doing anything about it. And he sent out that tweet earlier today, and I'm gonna quickly show you guys. Eversource wants $25 more a month from Connecticut families while reporting $1.7 billion in profit and delivering shareholders a 23% bump. Does that sound like a struggling company? Pura must protect ratepayers, not corporate bottom lines. Well, this is disingenuous for a few different reasons, okay? One, in business, you have a responsibility as the business. It's a fiduciary responsibility to your stakeholders, to your shareholders, to make sure that they get the most amount of value out of the stock that they own in your company. Second point on this is Lamont is the one that designed Pura and has put people in charge of Pura. They're not Republicans there. They're all Democrats. So he's pretending like it's not his party that's in control of that department, which is just insane to me. He's got the authority. He can fire everybody on there and he can put people in as he sees fit. But also at the same time, we know that Eversource is paying him off and paying the people on the Pura board off, which is why the rates keep increasing. And him talking about discussing some deal with Eversource, it's like, well, you're just undermining Pura, right? So what is it? Do you want to continue to undermine Pura, which you created, or do you want to take credit for stuff that you've done rather than have it go through Pura? So if that's the case, what's the point of Pura other than that they're just going to collect that public benefits charge off of everybody? I find it a little ridiculous, and I'm kind of tired of the games that they play, and the fact that there's so many voters that are just stupid and don't realize what's going on. It's like they just keep the blind eye, and it's the same talking points like, oh, we have to go after the rich, we have to tax the rich, and it's like, who's rich in the state outside of like a couple counties and a couple towns within those counties? We don't have some massive population where we're all millionaires, right? And typically, if you're a millionaire in the state, you're probably in your 60s or 70s and you've had a full career and you've invested your money, and you're going to penalize those people because they invested their money after they worked their asses off to get to that point. It's just not fair. And I think that there's so many people that are jealous. And I think that's the problem with the Democrats is the constituents on that side are just a jealous by nature group, right? They see other people succeeding and making money, and they get upset that they're not in that situation. And it's that entitlement, right, where they think that they're owed millions of dollars and they're owed all of this, versus the people on the right went out and they created all these opportunities and they invested so much of their time and energy into education, into networking, and everything else that it took to get to where they are. And then not only that, but they spent 30, 40 years working their asses off, saving as much as they could for retirement. And you want to punish them because you can't figure out that that's what it takes to become successful in the United States. It's a little crazy to me. Then you add on top of the fact that, yeah, these Pura rates, the pure, I call them the pure rates, because really they're the ones that are approving it. As much as Tong, General, what is he, Assistant General or General Counsel Tong loves to speak about, oh, I'm going to look over this and we'll make sure that you're not getting screwed. It's like, you're not making sure we're not getting screwed, because we've been getting screwed and you've looked over everything in the past. So why would we think that anything is different this time? And I think this is important because this is a nonpartisan issue where everybody's feeling the heat from these electric bills, and you can't exactly blame Trump for the electric bills in Connecticut, right? Because Trump has tried to help people in Connecticut by getting that pipeline open back up in New York to get energy coming in that way. Because right now, as we're reliant so heavily on Eversource, a lot of people don't realize that Eversource is getting most of their energy from out of state and out of country. A lot of it's coming in from Canada, and Canada is taxing the hell out of that. So part of the tariffs was to attack Canada for the energy costs, right? People just don't know, and they didn't really discuss that, other than that's when they were blaming Trump for the rates in Connecticut. But the rates in Connecticut were already super high going back to probably COVID, if not earlier. And they've just continued to gone up, right? Especially as people are getting solar power, right? It shouldn't that put less of a burden on the grid, where there should be more of a supply? And if you have too much of a supply, it should actually be cheaper on the consumer. That's economics 101. So the question is how come they still don't have an oversupply to the point where our rates will be cheaper? There's got to be something else going on. And I know that we have data centers here for AI and a bunch of other stuff, but businesses have been moving out of the state left and right. So we're losing revenue from those businesses, and Eversource is losing revenue. So when they lose revenue from these billion-dollar corporations that keep the lights on and are probably paying a couple $100,000 a month, those are big accounts for them, right? So we have to make up the difference to their bottom line. And Lamont doesn't want to admit to that, but everything works together in an economy. So you have to look at all these different factors and be like, they're all playing into it, right? So what are we going to do to get the factors that are playing into it leveled off so that the people don't feel this burden on their wallets anymore? And part of that is getting more opportunity in here through companies moving back. And if that takes offering them a tax incentive of, you're not going to pay a single corporate tax for 5 to 10 years, then so be it. Because at the end of the day, their income taxes from the people that are working for them are going to be more than what it is currently, which is zero, because those companies aren't here, right? So it's always going to work out in some way or another. It's just they're not doing it. And believe it or not, we used to be a tax haven state for a lot of corporations. And that's why so many companies wanted to come here initially, until that got taken away under Malloy. And he said, no, everybody's got to pay their fair share. And this is also along the lines of that person out in Seattle that just says, oh, no billionaire is actually, or no millionaire or billionaire is going to leave just because of our taxes. Meanwhile, they're leaving, right? So as you leave this state with your money, the money that we were collecting off of you for your revenue for taxes is now going to have to be forced on everybody else, which is why the taxes keep increasing, because people keep moving out. When I went to the debate between Betsy and Ryan and I asked the question, how are you going to get people and businesses back into the state? That's where they were talking about no income taxes, at least Betsy was. And Ryan was talking about figuring out a way to offer tax credits to get the companies in here, because he knows, just like the rest of us, that we want jobs here. We want better talent, right? We want our schools, our universities to be feeder systems to the companies that are here. We have a couple Fortune 500 companies, but at the end of the day, we had more. Travelers, they have a huge presence here. They were started here, right? They were a Hartford company. They moved their headquarters out down to New York, right? So that's a Fortune 500 company. We also had Cigna, which did move back, but the only reason they moved back is because Malloy ended up offering them a 10-year corporate tax-free idea and helped pay for the facility that became their headquarters. So again, Malloy had to do this because he was under so much pressure of all those companies leaving that he had to figure out a way to get somebody back here. So Cigna came back, and they were probably the last big company that came here because We've lost General Electric. They moved up to the Boston Back Bay. We've lost Lego. They're down in Mexico now. We've lost Duracell recently. They've taken their R&D headquarters out of here. So there's a lot of companies, a lot of strong Fortune 500 and Fortune 1000 companies that have just left because they can't afford to be here anymore, not only because of the electric rates, but because of the taxes and uh, the amount of nonsense that the state is putting them through when it comes to regulations. I understand it that we have a state that wants to regulate, but we've got a Republican in office in the presidency, and they've done everything they can to slash some of this regulation because a lot of it is just ridiculous. I agree that there's some stuff that needs to be regulated, but for the most part, not nearly as much as what we've been seeing. There, we have nuclear power plants that should be turned back on, and if we can't get them to get the rates down, well, then we need to find out who can build plants here, and if that takes offering people an incentive to give them the land for free and say you got to build a power plant here, then so be it, right? Instead, it seems that the state is just doing everything they can to not only buy up properties like they tried to do in Holland and put a juvenile detention center here, even though there's no police force, right? That was an issue that I had talked about on the Connecticut Common Sense podcast. And it got to the point that it was so bad, it was such a fight that the state just pulled out because they knew they fucked up really bad and they didn't follow the process. Because that's what Democrats do is they love to just let's just do it, and then if they sue us, they sue us and we lose, but hopefully they won't sue us, right? They just throw everything and hope it sticks to the wall, because eventually stuff will stick to the wall. So the state is just buying up properties, right? And now they're selling that property down the road for me because they couldn't turn it into a detention center because they didn't follow the rules. And they thought that they could come into Holland and bully us into changing our zoning for them to put this detention center in. And the detention center was not only going to be across from a federal building, it was also going to be next to two different daycares. So it's just not a good area to have it. And really we don't have the support that we need. The biggest police force we have is the Troop C State Barracks, and they're not police in Tolland. They're police for the district that they're a part of. We have what's called a resident trooper, which basically means the town has to pay the salary of like 3 or 4 resident troopers to be our police force. And those resident troopers are on cycles constantly. So you'll see them parked out, but they don't have the resources to go out and like patrol the town and look for crime. So when this cockfighting incident happened up the street from me, and honestly, like what's crazy is Tolland is so small that both places, one's down the street, the other's up the street from where we're talking proximity. I live on Old Post Road, and Mountain Spring connects to it. In fact, the guy that his mailbox Kraus that was on the news report, he's my excavator. He did a pipe for me out in the front of my yard for drainage. So I knew him, and I saw his video first on Facebook, and I'm like, oh, that's hilarious that it's happening right next to him. And he's a staunch Republican, and that's the thing is like we are so conservative in this area that we will call everything on our neighbors, because if there's anything out of the ordinary, we're immediately calling because we're like they would have texted us or they would have called us before they left to go on vacation or anything like that. So like that's how tight knit this community is up here, and that's how tight knit Connecticut used to be in general. That's how New England used to be in general, but it's not like that anymore. It seems like we've got a lot of bitterness, and that bitterness is because of politics, essentially. And you might be saying, well, no, that can't be true, but it is. As the taxes got out of control, as the companies started to leave, people became very bitter. You're dealing with complaint after complaint. You're dealing with your taxes increasing year after year. I call it chasing the dragon, right? That's like getting high off heroin for the 5th time. Like you're trying to chase that high, right? That's why they call it the dragon, because you see dragons, right? When you're high in heroin. I don't know. I've never done heroin. Don't quote me on that. But that's just what I've been told by people that have discussed it in drug rehab programs. So as you lose companies and you lose your population, that burden of revenue has to fall on everybody else's shoulders. And then when you've got a state government that loves to spend money and loves to expand their state union, um, we're at an impasse here. And Democrats don't seem to understand this. At least the voters don't, and maybe the politicians don't either. It seems like they are having their as much fun as they possibly can have because they're all in charge, and we've got maybe 12 state senators on the Republican side, while they've got like 30 something on the left. So they've got a supermajority for pretty much everything. Um, so I think we're all kind of done with that at this point, where we have to rally around the fact that they've had control of this state since 2010, which was when Malloy took office, and we have gotten progressively worse over the last 16 years. I wish it wasn't the case, but it's every facet of your life has gotten worse. Healthcare, right? Insurance has gotten worse. Finding opportunities to work has gotten worse. We are a high worth state, but that's because we've got billionaires in the state, and such a small population. So those billionaires throw off the per capita, right? So they can use all these talking points, but it's up to us to understand that they're fucking bullshitting you. Like, dead ass, they are bullshitting you. Yes, it's great to say that, but then when you actually look at it, you're like, wait a second, our per capita is at like $100,000 or whatever it is, but we've got like 6 people that are worth $100 billion. So that is going to skew everything, right? Because on an average, that's going to increase a population. I mean, and I can do this math really quick. We've got a population of 3.5 million, right? Give or take. Whoops. That's going to increase the salary per capita per person by $28,000, $28,500. So obviously we're going to look like we have all this money, and that we're going to look like we're in such a great spot, because those people that are at that top 1% are basically covering a third of what everybody else is making and actually reporting for their income. So we know the billionaires don't get taxed at the same rates as the rest of us do, right? I'm not even worried about that. That's like, it's such bullshit, because they create so many jobs that really they shouldn't get taxed, because the money that they pay out gets taxed, right? So I don't believe that we need to charge billionaires some ridiculous surcharge. And I know that the Democrats are in shambles right now, where Josh Elliott is going against Malloy, or not Malloy, Lamont, Lamoy, I should call him, because he's basically a worse version of Malloy. Um, he's saying that he wants to put a surcharge, like a 4% surcharge on billionaires. Well, as most people know, you don't carry all of your money in cash. So to charge people a 4% surcharge, billionaires, they have attorneys, they have tax attorneys, they have specialists, they have consultants that will hide the hell out of their money so that you won't actually know what they own and what's cash. So you're never going to get that 4%. So that's the problem when we hear these bullshit statements like, oh, we need to charge billionaires a fair share. What are you talking about? Billionaires have property that they're paying ridiculous tax on, right? They have all those expensive cars, they have the expensive houses, they've got multiple businesses. They are paying a ton in taxes through all of that, and they're smart enough to not have their money in cash, nor do they typically take large salaries. So their W-2 could be like $100,000, but they own so much in tax, not in tax, in stocks, that they get lines of equity based off of the value of those stocks, right? Billionaires typically do not have $1 billion in the bank. They've got assets. They've got lines of credit based off of what a bank predicts them to be worth. And that's because of what they own. Okay, so when I was a business owner, I was considered a millionaire because of the value of my business and the other assets like my house and my cars and all of that. Okay, so that's what drives up what you're willing to get from a bank for a loan. It doesn't mean that you have I've never had $1 million sitting in my bank account. So to have to report myself as being worth like $1.5 to $2 million when I was 30 years old, it was just fucking ridiculous because I didn't have that money. And I'm getting taxed at such a ridiculous rate to be a small business owner as it is, because I have to pay my own, I have to basically pay both sides of the tax. Social Security, I'm paying the full amount, right? I'm paying the full income tax that normally the company will cover half, and then you pay the other half for certain taxes. I'm covering that whole thing. And when it came to using that paid family medical leave shit, I'm paying into it, but I couldn't even use it because I was making my money out of state in Massachusetts, which was where my business was based out of. So I had to pay taxes in Massachusetts, and then Massachusetts would then, at the end of the year, take the money that I paid them, send it to Connecticut, and I'd have to fill out a tax form for both states, right? And then I'd end up owing in Connecticut, even though I paid Massachusetts, but just because Massachusetts has a slightly lower tax rate, I would owe on top of what I got. And then when it came to actually wanting to use that paid family medical leave when I had a child, I couldn't do it because the state was like, well, you don't make your money here. It's like, but what the fuck? Why can't I get approved for that if I'm paying into it? And Massachusetts, which I'm also paying into it for, it's like, yeah, you can't use it here because you're not a resident. So I'm paying into a fund in two different states that I can't use because I'm not a resident here and I'm not making my money here. So that's the type of bullshit that business owners are going through. And that's why it's so hard to want to start up a company in Connecticut. And that's just on a small level, right? Like Main Street America is what made this country great. Those Main Street companies became the corporations that you see now. Everything was started in a garage, right? All of Silicon Valley was basically started in incubators in people's houses and garages, and then they became what they are now. Like Facebook started in a dorm in Boston, a Harvard dorm in Boston, I should say, and now it's a multi-billion, almost trillion-dollar organization. Um, that's the point I'm getting at. Is we are stifling innovation in the state. We are doing everything we can to try and squeeze as much juice out of the piggy bank, and it's getting to the point that the piggy bank doesn't have any juice left. In fact, the piggy bank is fractured down the middle, and it's getting more and more compressed to the point that there's not going to be anything left, because as we've seen through the census numbers, so many people have left the state that we are in a negative growth for a lot of different areas. And I can get into that because I actually have a lot of the numbers that have been predicted, as well as I've done some of my own predictions. And you'll see a lot of negative percentages. So when we see Lamont put that type of shit out, it drives me crazy because it's so disingenuous. But we also know that those Democrat faithfuls are loving it and eating into it and buying it up like it's the word of God. And it's embarrassing because I always grew up, everybody used to say, oh, the left is so educated. They're so educated. Yeah. Okay. Well, what about now, right? The right is educated, and the right has always been educated. We just don't throw it in people's faces, right? That's our whole thing, is like, keep it to yourself. Why brag? Just be humble. There's no point in being arrogant because nobody likes arrogance, especially in New England, because everybody can be arrogant, but everybody's going to shit talk you if you're acting out of pocket. So I think that it's a misnomer, and I think that they might have more master's degrees, sure, but education does not equate to intelligence or wisdom. Okay, so let's make that clear. Most people I know that are highly educated on the left have zero sense of common sense. And common sense is one of the biggest things when it comes to IQ and EQ. So as a Republican, I know most Republicans have a ton of common sense, which means that technically Republicans are more intelligent from an IQ perspective and from a rationalization perspective than the left. And you can see it because the left is just yelling stuff at you and thinking that the louder they are, the more right they are. That's why you see so many deranged people over on that side. And I'm not going to say that we don't have deranged people on the right. I know, like, there's the Nick Fuentes boys, those, what are they, the Groypers? They have no business being involved in the Republican side, just because they're fucking morons and they're making us look bad. And I think that's the biggest shift right now for us in this state, is we are so willing to turn on the people that we don't think belong in the party. And that's something that we haven't done in the past. And the Democrats had done that in the past, and now they're not doing it. They're propping up all those crazy people. So when they were doing what we were doing, they were winning. Now they're doing what we used to do, um, and they're going to start to lose pretty severely. So I could talk about this for hours, right, and bore everybody and go over the statistics, but I'm not going to do that. There's so much time between now and November, and I'm sure we're going to hear a lot of other dumb stuff, like that woman that the Connecticut MAGA account posted earlier. I think it was a TikTok where she was talking about running against John Larson, and that, oh, now we know that John Larson's money is coming from a shady place. But don't worry, you can trust her. It's like, but you're gonna get the same money that John Larson got from the same places because you all have the same fucking donors. So what are you talking about? Why, like, who like listens to that and doesn't understand that? I'll tell you who, it's the left, because they don't know any better. But you on the right are always calling that shit out like immediately. Like, you can't fool us. Like, that day and time is over. We are a much smarter group of people. We are much more savvy, and we have a lot more energy to us than we've had in the past. And that energy is going to come out in this election come November. So, Michael Goldstein, running out of Congressional District 4. Michael Goldstein was on the Connecticut Common Sense podcast when I was there, and Selena Rifkin. Um, we did an interview. We let him talk, and when I posted that video earlier this week showing the stats, especially with Mansfield, he commented that he was running and he was running unopposed. So I said, okay, great. Let me run some numbers. So I ran some numbers for him. Just pull them up right here. Stuff like this takes a while to compile. So if you are a candidate, please don't overwhelm me and expect me to have this done like that. I'm hoping to get one of these done a week, just because of how laborious it is to not only combine the stats but then find the correct information. So what I did, I'm going to turn off my webcam. There we go. Let's see. Trying to turn off my overlay as well. Of course, it's not going to work. Anyway, so I went back in time to 1987, which was when Chris Shays won in the 4th district. Okay, remember, this was 6 districts at the time. So he won that special election in 1987, and he was actually in charge from 87 through 2006. Okay, so he lost in 2008. So that means that essentially he was in that position for 20 something years, 21 years. And we lost the congressional seat in 2003. That's a Googleable thing, so you can trust me that that's not something that I'm making up. And what I did was I went back and I added all the people that were there and the vote totals, just because I wanted to get a basis, right? But because we had that weird situation where we lost a seat, I basically have to eliminate most of this stuff from 2006 and before. Okay, so looking at 2006 onwards, you can see Shays lost after 2006, and Himes has been there for the last several elections. And I know people have looked at this and tried to come up with some excuse for the amount of votes seeming to be irregular, but I got a little bit of news for you folks. People will come out when there's a federal election versus when there's a state election. So why I've marked this as gubernatorial versus presidential is because these presidential races, you'll see, will have higher totals of votes, right? This was Obama. This was Obama. This was Trump. This was Biden. And this was Trump. Well over 300,000 votes, okay? And then it's the other years, those gubernatorial years, where you'll see the under 200,000 and the under 300,000. In fact, I have the average for those years. And it is right here. For the non-presidential elections between, I think I did, yeah, I did from 2010 on because I only want to look back the last 4 terms for governor's races. Just because if I look back any further, the state grew so much in population that it wouldn't make sense to use them. Um, we an average of 232,000 people come out to vote in these elections in the gubernatorial races. Um, and we had 236 last time around. So it's just right above that average. So with that, I'm using an average to come up with a percentage that I can then calculate a lot of different things at. So I calculated based off of historical trends what I think the population will be this year in 2026. And again, I am basing it off of every 4 years because it is safer to go off of 4 years than it is to go off of 2 years because there's direct data involved on the 4 year marks. And then on the 2 years, they might not have it up in the system yet. In 2026, because it is just now into 2026, they haven't done their math and published it to give me that. So I can't really use that. So I just want to know what's the growth for the 4 year look back, not every 2 years. Because again, I'm avoiding those presidential election years. Okay. So I ran the numbers, and this is where I'm predicting 2026's population to be come November for Congressional District 4. It's going to be 742,000. And another thing that confuses me about the population here is we don't know how many people in the population are illegals and how many are uh, active voters. I'm finding an inconsistency where it's saying that typically there is about 20% of the population that is not 18. So that'd be 17 and younger, which is the population that cannot vote. So if you look at the full 3.5 million person population, 20% is a very small number. We don't have anywhere close to that for registered voters, never mind party voters. Okay, so um, I can't imagine there's a million or so illegal immigrants here, but I'm wondering where are the rest of those people? You're telling me that many people in the state of Connecticut do not have the ability to vote, even though that it is their God-given right in this country. So that's something that is very suspicious to me. And the 2024 population, just because I saw that it was such a jump from 2022, um, was 17,000. But so I included just that one just because it was the most relevant that I could find, because 2026 doesn't exist yet. And you can see these totals have jumped considerably, right? 98, 2002. But what's weird is um, you can say, but this district wasn't in the same capacity. Well, it's the towns that got readjusted into the district. That's why in 1998, this is what if the fourth district existed like it does today in 1998, this would have been the population. Just so you don't get confused as to why I went off that spiel about how we took away that district and everybody got more of a population. It's just those towns have to get adjusted somewhere. And in fact, I have the initial towns earlier on in these tabs, because back in 1994, they actually had each district available with the amount of votes for each town in each district. Um, the state stopped doing this for whatever reason. It's they made it very hard to find some of this intel, and I would imagine it's because they don't want people looking into the inconsistencies that they're refusing to show us. So anyway, so I have this area only going up about 15,000 from where it was in 2024, and that's because it went up so sharply in 2022. For all I know, it could be more like a 2014 to 2018 where it could shrink. I can't take that risk when it comes to trying to win an election for the Republicans in CD4. So for this purpose, I looked at the average number of votes that the winning representative got in those gubernatorial years. So I put all of them here, but on the average, it is 2010, 14, 18, and 22. So going back those four, the average votes that that person is getting, the average votes that Himes is getting to win the election is only 133,000 votes. That's not that big of a difference to make up when you see the opponents. Like 2014 was a tight year. 2022 is getting, what is that, 96,000 votes. So it's about a 45,000 vote difference, right, for this year in 2022 that Mike is going to have to make up. And Mike ran last time around, but he ran into the buzzsaw, which was all those Democrats came out to vote because it was a presidential election and they didn't want Trump. So that's why this number is so huge. It's just you run into those issues when people just really hate Trump and they want to make sure that no Republican wins. So because we are not really into that situation right now, and Trump has kind of left his hands off of Connecticut for the most part, the Republicans have a real opportunity to steal some votes in some of these areas. So I've broken this down by stat that is important. So when you see stuff like this is just registered Republican voters to the party, Democrat registered voters to the party, unaffiliated registered voters to the party, and I did it by town. So what this is going to show you is the prediction is that there's going to be just under 100,000 registered Republicans, and there's going to be, basically, you can see here, almost the exact same between the unaffiliated and the Democrat Republicans registered. So we know that not all of the voters are going to show up, right? And what I did was I took the percentage of the population that actually turns out on average, and I weighed that into these numbers to say this is most likely what's going to happen. This is most likely who's going to come out to vote. So it's up to Mike to get in touch with those unaffiliated people and either get them to register or do what I said at the top of the hour, which was spend money to market to them to get in front of them. And another thing that Mike can do is he can try and win the endorsement of another party so that he goes on the ticket twice. Because believe it or not, if you are on that ticket twice, people that don't pay attention to politics, that have seen your picture or gotten mail from you, and then go into a voter's booth and they see your name there not once but twice, they will think automatically that you must be the best person for the job because you have been endorsed and put on the ticket through two or more parties. Malloy did this trick, and Lamont has done this trick. Lamont has been on a ticket 3 times as a governor just to win that race. And I have that data here, and that would have been right here in 2022. He was on for 3 different parties. So I did some numbers early on for the governor's race where it showed like that secondary party is actually the reason why Foley lost initially to Malloy, and I can show you that just so you know what I'm understand what I'm saying. So you see here, Foley actually got from Republican, like from people that voted Republican as the party, not necessarily people that are Republicans, just people that voted Republican. Foley got 561,000 votes. Malloy, from people that voted Democrat, got 541,000 votes. That means that that Malloy actually lost between the major parties for his seat, but because he was on there for the second endorsement, the working families, he ended up beating Foley because he got the additional 26,000 votes from the working families. if that working families was not on there, then these people might not have voted for Malloy at all. And they might have voted for the independent Marsh. So because he got on there twice, he actually stole all of those votes essentially in a very smart play and beat out Foley. So if Mike does something like that and he's on that ticket multiple times, we might see him do exactly what Malloy did and had to do to beat Lamont, to beat Foley back in 2010. So I think that's a strategy that he can use, but also we're going to go over what we think people are going to come out to look like. So the population turnout for each of these cities is right here. So we're predicting that there will most likely be between 227,000 and that 232,000 that I said was the average. So it's going to be roughly in that range. And since the winner is typically taking 57% of the votes, if you can break into that, assuming that there's no other party besides Mike and Himes, so that this independent party isn't there, and it's typically just the two parties, but there are the occasional four party where you have the Libertarians and the Green Party, and then there were like Natural Law, whatever that was. So if in 2026 it is just a Republican and a Democrat, I would suggest that Mike puts himself on as an independent, because he still would have lost this 2024 election, but he would have gotten these votes right here. And he might have even got some votes from the Democrats that just want to vote independent, but they didn't like Wesley. So we have to be thinking about stuff like that when it comes to making sure that we're using these numbers correctly to our advantage in the strategy. So what it's going to take if we're using that 58% is based off of what we think the population turnout is going to be. It's going to take 129,000 votes to win this election. Okay, and since the average was 132 or 133, right around there, I would say as a safe bet, aim for 140. Try to flip as many people as possible. You are already guaranteed, if these numbers are correct with the population turnout, you are guaranteed to get around 100,000 votes from people voting Republican. So you have to take those votes from the independents and the unaffiliated and grab them, suck them over to you. And I wanted to show you all this, what towns are the most conservative, like what towns have been conservative historically, but then recently have swung the other way, because those are battleground towns, right? Like when we talk about national politics, you have battleground states, you have those swing states. Well, if we look at it from a state perspective, we have swing towns in all of these congressional districts. So let's focus our energy on the swing towns, because that's where we can spend a lot of money and get those votes. And then we can go into like the Bridgeports and the Norfolks and spend some money just to try and get an extra 1,000 to 2,000 votes in that area. So there's not a whole hell of a lot of difference between the Republican votes and the Democrat votes. That's going to be, right now, it's predicted to be a 104 to a 123 victory for the Dems. But again, those numbers have actually decreased for Democrats. And I know this because I did the math to see what are they shrinking, and if so, where are they shrinking? Just like with the Republicans, are they shrinking, and if so, where? And that's what I did. I did the percent of active registered voters by year, by party, by population estimate. And I say by estimate, even though 2002 to 2022 are in the past. Realistically, the census comes out every 10 years, and they just have to estimate between those 10 years. So they don't even call them proclamated numbers. They just call them estimates, even when they have the actual, because not everybody fills out the census. Okay, let's be serious. Illegal immigrants don't always fill it out because they're afraid that they're going to get arrested by ICE. So we never really know. Just like we never really know if we have everybody that's registered as a U.S. citizen, based off of the fact that we have so many people that are not registered to vote, despite having a 3.5 million person population. I'm going to go out on a limb and say we probably have a lot of people that are just afraid to fill out that voter registration. It could be 100,000. It could be even more. But regardless, we've actually seen the Democrats trend down in a lot of these towns for their grasp. In 2010 to 2014, they lost about 1.5%. Then they gained 4.5%. Now this one's tricky because this 2018, I'm not looking at this one to point it out as like some sort of fraud thing. It's just that this election had 1.4 million people come out to vote for it for a non-presidential election. And that's because there was a U.S. senator a spot up for grabs. But we actually got the most elections in this gubernatorial race because of that. And I don't believe that that's going to be the case this time around, because those elections are every 6 years anyway, and they're offsetting, just because of the Senate rule where you can't have like 2/3 of the senators can't are up for election at the same time, and then the remaining third are not up for election at that time. That's just how they wrote it into the Constitution when they designed the government. And that was for a continuity thing, just to make sure that policies are still getting passed. So anyway, I'm not. Again, these are the averages, right? But I don't really want to look at the average when you've got this outlier in here. So I would take out 2018 from this, which would be right here. And now you can see, pull this down, they're actually shrinking, because I'm taking out the outlier year. So they are shrinking in every area. And if I have to take out the same year for this party, the unaffiliated. Oops. And the Republicans. There you go. So the Republicans are gaining from 2022. The Democrats are losing about 3%, and the independents are losing about 2% on average. So the Republicans are already gaining in most of these towns. It's just as the independents are clearly switching to Republicans, let's take advantage of that and let's run some campaigns to get some of those voters in the towns where we see Republicans are gaining the most. So like from 2022 to 20 to the average, this town, New Canaan, has drastically decreased with Republicans, where it had a high of 32% in 2014, and then in 2022 it was 24.5%. So that's an area where you can steal some votes and get people to go back to being Republican, and that's going to help you out because New Canaan has the overall votes total of New Canaan right here. It's going to have about 8,800 votes based off of the population turnout. So rather than the 5,131, historically it was over 6,000. So again, when we're looking at making up grounds, we got to look at these areas where we can make up 1,000 here, 500 there, etc. And that's what's going to help us win. So I did this so that you could see what the history is of these towns, and you can go to these towns and make sure you're spending enough time and grabbing enough people's attention that you can swing them back to the right. Because it could be that maybe people in New Canaan felt that they weren't being appreciated by the person running. We cannot falter and let New Canaan become majority Democrat. So we have to put the stopping blocks on it now, and we have to do that to a lot of these other areas that have lost Republicans over the last couple of years, because that's going to result. And when I did the math, you could actually make up 30,000+ votes by going to certain towns and getting people to start voting Republican again. And those stats will be in here, and I'll send this to you. So there's like an average number of people that are voting as registered Republicans in each town, and you can actually see, like Greenwich, for instance, the average is 13,000, but only 12,000 people last time around. So that means that there's 1,000 people that you can get in Greenwich back over to the right. Okay, so anywhere where you see that the average is higher than what the 2022 number is, that's where you know I've got to go into those cities. So Wilton, Westport, right? Stamford, and then looks like Stamford, you actually can go in and spend some time and you'll gain more because you've already got momentum there. So you're going to see the towns that you have momentum in, and then you're going to see the towns that you've lost momentum in as a Republican, and that's where you're going to beat them, and you don't have to worry about the likes of a Bridgeport where you're going to run into a buzzsaw of a 17,500 to a 4,500 difference, right? So we've got to close this gap and a couple of these other gaps like Stamford and then Norwalk. Those are the biggest gaps that we've got to close. And the best way to do that is to lean into the towns where you've already got the advantage and just try and gain more people in those towns that have slightly lost Republican faith over the last couple of years. And there's this whole psychology behind it where people might not want to vote Republican anymore because they feel that they're not going to win the election. Well, if people knew how close that you actually could come to winning this election with just their support, I think you'd start to get a lot more energy from those constituents in Congressional District 4. So you've got a real path and a real good shot of winning this election in CD4. If you are in CD4, you need to reach out to Michael Goldstein and you need to support him in any way you can. If you're in one of those towns I will publish where you are a battleground town, you have to do what you can to get people to register for Republican. You have to do what you can to make sure people are aware that they've got a real shot of getting a Republican in office and that now is the time for change, because what's been going on in the state has not worked. We know it hasn't worked on a state level, never mind on a national level. So the energy is there. We just need people to volunteer and help Mike out, because he's not going to get support from the GOP. We know that Ben Proto is not one to give money out. He expects you to self-fund your own stuff, and Republicans typically do not donate as much politically from a currency or a capital perspective. But capital, to me, you can have human capital. Human capital is volunteer hours. It's making sure that we're giving what we can. Me creating these types of spreadsheets, that's me using my human capital and not charging people. Even though I feel that the GOP should be basically taking the money that they're getting and paying people like me to put this stuff together for the candidates. That's just a story for a different time. Eventually, when Ben Proto loses and we rebuild the whole GOP in the state, that's most likely what it's going to come down to, is that the GOP will be that support system that we need, because that's the only way we're going to win these elections, is if there is somebody that has a full-blown strategy and can put money exactly where it needs to be to have that strategy pay off. Proto doesn't have this type of numbers in front of him. He hasn't even probably thought about this. He's just so old school that he just thinks that people are either going to vote for you or they're not going to vote for you based off of your party. We know that's not the case, especially in Connecticut, where we used to have a lot more red here. We can get that back. And we're seeing, we actually gained ground in the last presidential election, where I think we gained 3 points into Kamala Harris from the prior election. So Republicans have been showing up lately, and they've been voting for people at a national level. So let's turn that 3% gain that we had in 2024 into another 2 to 3% gain. And all of a sudden, it's no longer a 60-40, it's slowly creeping down to 51-48 or a 51-49. And that's what we're getting close to. And this election in 2026 is going to show the country that Connecticut can flip back to being red. We just have to apply these strategies. It's the sabermetrics of politics. So I will send this out to Mike. And if anybody's in this area that wants to help Mike out, please get in contact with me and I will get you in contact with Mike, or you can just tweet at him directly. He is on X. Other than that, I just crossed the hours a little past midnight, so I am going to go to bed. I hope everybody has an incredible Friday and weekend. Happy Memorial's Day. God bless America. God bless Connecticut. And let's take our time this weekend to reflect on the fact that we are going to win in November. The energy is there. People feel it. Talk about it. Make sure everybody knows the Democrats do not have a shot. We know this. They are attacking themselves. We can add fuel to that fire for the first time. We are no longer a split party. We have come together over the last year and a half. Thank you to Jason Douglas. Thank you to CT MAGA. Thank you to Connecticut MAGA. Thank you to the CT News Network. We are showing up for the first time in my lifetime living in the state. So, with that being said, go have those barbecues and make sure that you're talking about the fact that we're finally going to be free of these Democrats come November.